I'm Nate Miller. I'm 34, and I was sitting under a white party tent in Napa Valley, in the middle of a family reunion I should have never attended, staring at a plate of warm potato salad while my uncle laughed and clapped me on the shoulder like I was the family dog who'd just peed on the carpet. Still doing that silly tech thing? Huh, he said, smirking. His voice wasn't loud, but loud enough. Loud enough for the cousins at the next table to hear, for Aunt Doreen to chuckle into her wine glass, for my father, 2 tables down, to glance up just long enough to confirm, yup, still not proud of me. Let me back up for a second. If you've ever sat through a family gathering pretending the comments don't sting, hit that like button. If you've ever had to prove your worth to the people who should have been the first to believe in you, drop a comment and tell me. What did you do when your silence was mistaken for weakness? Because trust me, mine almost was. The last time I went to a family reunion, I was 29, broke, and couch surfing after walking away from a toxic job that almost burned me out. I just started tinkering with a product idea in my friend's garage, and I was working nights as a barista to survive. Nobody in my family asked how I was holding up, but they loved to offer suggestions. You should apply at Derek's firm. They have benefits. Have you considered accounting? You were always good at math. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. Nate. Not Nate. Nate. Always like I was still 12, so I stopped going. I didn't cut them off. I just opted out. Quietly. No drama. 5 years passed. In those 5 years, I built a tech company from scratch. Quietly. I got seed funding. Then Series A. We signed our first 7-figure partnership last winter. We have no social media. No website splash. We're invisible by design. Strategic stealth. Because success, at least mine, isn't loud. But a few weeks ago, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Aunt Marie. Would love to see you again. We'll all be together. It won't be the same without you. It sat on my kitchen counter for days. I'd pick it up, turn it over, stare at the ink like maybe it held a hidden message. My girlfriend called it nostalgic guilt bait. She wasn't wrong. But part of me, some stubborn, buried part, wanted to go. Not to prove anything. Or at least that's what I told myself. The reunion was being held at a vineyard estate just outside Napa. You know the type linen-draped tables under wide tents? Charcuterie spreads that cost more than your rent. Kids in button-downs chasing soap bubbles like mini CEOs in training. I pulled up in my battered 2011 Honda Civic, parked between a Tesla and a Range Rover that probably had more Bluetooth features than my entire apartment. I caught my reflection in the car window as I stepped out. Pressed shirt, simple shoes, clean shave. Not flashy, not broke, just unremarkable. And that's exactly how I felt the moment I stepped onto the lawn. Aunt Doreen found me first. Oh, Nate, she said, as if the name had dust on it. Her hug smelled like lilac perfume and obligation. Still living in, where was it? Seattle. Or did you finally come to your senses and move somewhere with real jobs? I smiled politely. Still in Seattle. Still doing that tech thing. She squinted, as if trying to remember if I sold keyboards or fixed routers. Yeah, I said. Still doing that tech thing? She gave a chuckle like I'd said something mildly inappropriate at church. They all came in waves after that. Cousin Tara with her perfect real estate teeth. I just closed 4 properties last week. The market's insane. You should really consider investing. Unless you're still building that app. Uncle Rick. My son. Jeremy. Just got promoted. Regional manager at West Coast Financial. You know them. Probably not. I nodded, sipping my watered-down lemonade, listening to Derek brag about his luxury remodel and golf membership while pretending not to notice the second glass of scotch in his hand. None of them asked about me. Not really. Because they already knew who I was. The nephew who never quite figured it out. The kid with ideas but no follow-through. The one who left a stable life to chase a dream and probably still rented. And honestly, I let them believe it. It was easier than explaining something they'd never understand. There was one moment, one tiny pause that stuck like a splinter. My niece, Lily, 8 years old, sharp as a whip, watched as Grandpa hugged Evan and handed him a gold foil card. She tugged at my shirt. "Why doesn't Grandpa hug you like that?" I blinked. "Maybe he's saving it for later," I said. She looked at me the way kids do when they know you're lying, then ran off. I stood there, still holding a paper plate of potato salad, heart suddenly heavier than the heat warranted. That's when Uncle Vernon swaggered over. He's my dad's younger brother, the alpha of the family. Loud, opinionated, still wearing sunglasses indoors and calling everyone champ. He used to run a bank before the '08 crash. Lost most of his portfolio but kept the smug. "Nate," he said, clapping me on the back so hard I nearly dropped my plate. "Still doing that silly tech thing? Thought you'd given up by now." His grin stretched wide, showing too many teeth. Around us, the cousins perked up. Aunt Marie chuckled. I heard someone mutter, "Oh boy," like they'd been waiting for the annual roast. I didn't answer, just gave a faint smile and looked down at my food. But Vernon wasn't finished. He pulled up a chair, leaned forward. "You know," he said, "I remember when you were little, always breaking stuff. Remotes, radios, and now you're the computer guy." "Huh?" Laughter bubbled around us. Not cruel, but not kind. Not a single person stepped in. Not my dad. Not Aunt Marie. Not even Derek, who usually played the mediator. And me. I just sat there, quiet, because I'd learned something they hadn't. Silence makes people underestimate you. And being underestimated is a gift. But just when I thought the awkwardness had peaked, I noticed something strange. Paul, my aunt's husband, was setting up a second camera tripod. He caught my eye, gave a quick nod. Then he mouthed, "You might want to stick around for this." I narrowed my eyes, because Paul wasn't one for theatrics. He worked in documentary production, always behind the lens, always observing. I started to wonder, had he been watching, recording, or was something else about to happen? And that's when I heard it, the slow crunch of gravel. A sleek, black car pulling up, doors clicking open, and the energy on the lawn shifted. Instantly, the gravel crunched under Italian tires. The kind of crunch that made conversations trail off mid-sentence, that turned heads even before the car fully came into view. It was a black-on-black Tesla Model S plaid, sleek, silent, and so wildly out of place next to Aunt Marie's dusty Volvo and Cousin Evan's look-at-me convertible. The door opened with a soft click, and out stepped a man in a perfectly cut navy blue suit. Not flashy, not loud, but intentional, the kind of presence that made people straighten their posture without realizing it. My chest tightened, and I swear time slowed for a second, because I knew exactly who that was. And judging by the way half the family froze with forks midair and champagne halfway to lips, they did too. He scanned the crowd. Calm. Calculated. His eyes didn't linger on the charcuterie board or the string lights or the overly eager cluster of aunts by the dessert table. No. He was looking for someone. Then, his gaze landed on me. He smiled. Broad. Familiar. Intentional. And my stomach did this awkward, involuntary lurch because I knew what was coming. He walked straight toward me. Paul, the only one still filming, pivoted his camera without saying a word. "Boss," the man said warmly, clapping me on the shoulder with the kind of familiarity you can't fake. "Didn't expect to see you here. Small world." Huh. Every single person within earshot went still. And we weren't in a small circle. We were under a giant tent surrounded by nearly 30 relatives. Napkins froze mid-wipe. Aunt Doreen's red wine tilted dangerously close to spilling. My dad coughed into his hand, suddenly very interested in the floorboards. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what could I say? The man leaned in, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Just wanted to say congrats. Your offer went through. The whole block's yours now. Development team's already prepping the site. The block, my block. The words landed like a bomb in a church pew. Uncle Vernon blinked, mouth slightly open. His glass of champagne trembled in his hand, the bubbles rising like they were trying to escape the tension. I glanced up and saw it. The shift. It was in the air. It was in the way Cousin Tara's eyebrows raised slightly, the way Rick stopped pretending to scroll on his phone, the way even Derek, who'd spent the last hour talking about stock options, stood completely frozen. He hadn't even flinched when his 3-year-old spilled juice on his loafers earlier. But now his jaw was tight, because this wasn't a joke anymore. Good to see you, Nate, the man said, stepping back. We'll finalize things Monday. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. He turned, walked calmly back to his car, and drove off, leaving behind him a silence so heavy it felt like a wool coat in July. I exhaled slowly, not smiling, not gloating, just breathing, because that was my moment. And I hadn't said a word. It's funny how quickly a room's temperature can change without touching the thermostat. For 5 years, I was the tech guy they didn't understand. Now, I was the guy that guy just called boss. People suddenly remembered I existed. Tara came back, asked casually, "What's your company called again?" Rick leaned over. "That guy, he's the one from Forbes, right?" Even Aunt Marie, sweet but oblivious, placed her hand gently on my arm and whispered, "Is there anything I can help you with for Monday?" As if she was part of it. But the one I watched was Vernon, my uncle, my biggest critic, the man who once told me, during Thanksgiving, "Your generation doesn't understand hard work. You think passion pays the bills?" He looked at me now like he was trying to solve an equation with missing variables. "You know him?" he finally croaked. I picked up my fork, wiped the edge with my napkin like it was the most normal thing in the world, and said, "Yeah, we work together." He squinted. "You work for him." Before I could respond, Lily, my niece, ran over, wide-eyed. "Uncle Nate, who was that man? Is he famous?" I crouched to her level. "He's a friend. We build things together." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Grandpa looked mad," she whispered. I smirked. Sometimes grown-ups get confused when the story changes. Then I stood up, dusted off my pants, and looked Vernon dead in the eye. "But to answer your question," I added, "no, I don't work for him." I let the silence hang. 1 Mississippi. 2. He works with me. It was subtle, but I swear I heard something crack inside Vernon's ego, like a hairline fracture in a fine wine glass. He tried to recover. "So, what exactly do you do?" The same question he'd mocked earlier. Same tone, but no longer rhetorical. I tilted my head, still doing that silly tech thing, and smiled. I walked away then, not dramatic, not storming, just calm, like someone who didn't need to prove anything anymore. I passed the dessert table, grabbed a cookie, and nodded at Paul, who was still filming quietly near the side of the tent. "You got that?" I asked. He smiled. "Every word. Make sure Grandpa hears it again, just in case he missed it the first time." Paul didn't laugh, but his eyes twinkled behind the lens. Back at my seat, I reached into my inner pocket. There it was, a silver fountain pen, the one I gave my dad for Father's Day when I was 19, the one he never used, still in its original box, buried in his office drawer under a stack of golf magazines. I clicked it open, held it for a second. That pen had once felt like my last plea to be noticed. Today, it was just a reminder, a symbol, that I'd stopped needing their validation a long time ago, and still built something worth everything. I placed it next to my plate. No speech, no mic drop, just presence. And that was more than enough. But as I bit into the cookie, still half listening to the stunned silence around me, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Familiar. Heavy. I turned. It was my dad. And the look in his eyes wasn't what I expected. My dad's hand was heavy on my shoulder, not forceful, not soft, just deliberate. Like he was unsure whether he was comforting me or confronting me. I looked up. His face was unreadable. That same stoic mask he'd worn my entire childhood. He had always been the type to measure his emotions like tablespoons of salt, just enough to flavor a moment, never enough to feel full. "You got a minute?" he asked. It wasn't a question. I stood, brushing cookie crumbs from my hands, and followed him past the garden trellis, down a gravel path that led to the edge of the vineyard. We walked in silence for at least 20 yards. The late afternoon sun dipped just enough to cast long shadows across the rows of vines. The breeze smelled faintly of oak barrels and expensive denial. Then, finally, he spoke. "You could have told me." His voice cracked not with emotion, but with years of rust. "Told you what?" I asked, knowing exactly what he meant. He stopped walking and turned toward me. "That you were doing this. That you made it." I exhaled. A slow, measured breath. "I did," I said. I just stopped expecting anyone to listen. He looked away, rubbed the back of his neck like he used to when coaching Little League, right before benching a kid whose parents were watching. "You think I didn't care?" I laughed quiet, bitter. "I think you cared more about who I wasn't than who I was becoming." The silence after that hit harder than anything else had all day. When I was 19, I gave him that silver fountain pen. Graduation gift. Engraved with his initials. He nodded when I handed it to him. Said, "Thanks." Like I'd just passed him a receipt. Never used it. I found it years later. Still sealed. Buried under a pile of tax documents. That pen taught me everything I needed to know about being noticed in this family. So no, I didn't think he cared. Not the way fathers should. But here's the thing. Sometimes the people who wound you don't even know they've drawn blood. Sometimes they think the silence you carry is just your way of being moody or too sensitive. Meanwhile, you're learning how to survive without their love. And you start to mistake that survival for strength. For years, he stared down at the dirt between us, like maybe he could find better words buried there. "I was proud of your brother because he followed a path I understood. Law school. Firm. Partnership. Clean. Predictable." I didn't interrupt. I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand. "You kept your head down. Never bragged. Never asked for help. Because every time I tried," I said, "I was told to get real, to stop wasting time, to grow up." He nodded. That time, it almost looked like regret, but almost doesn't count in families like mine. Back at the tent, the music had changed. Someone had put on a Motown playlist, and the volume was just loud enough to mask the sudden awkwardness that had infected everyone. I watched from the edge of the vineyard as people kept glancing toward the empty chair where I'd been sitting, like the absence had become louder than my presence ever was. Lily was playing with a bubble wand again, this time with another little girl. She caught sight of me and waved. I waved back. Then something odd happened. Cousin Tara, high heels and all, walked across the lawn toward my seat. She looked around, then quietly picked up the silver pen I'd left beside my plate. She turned it over in her hands, curiosity on her face, before placing it gently back where it was. Maybe she recognized what it meant. Maybe not. But she didn't pocket it. She respected it. That, in this family, was practically a miracle. I rejoined the gathering about 10 minutes later. Not center stage. Not triumphant, just Nate. The guy who'd stopped letting their opinions shape his. But now they weren't throwing opinions like darts anymore. They were listening. I could feel it. And that's when Paul approached me again, holding a small black box. "Hey," he said, handing it to me. "Found this in the gift pile earlier. No name on it. Thought it might be yours." I took the box. Lightweight. Matte texture. Unmarked. I opened it. Inside, a pen. Not the pen, but a different one, new, sleek, engraved with 3 simple words. I see you. No note. No signature. My throat tightened. Could have been anyone. Aunt Marie. Maybe even Dad. Or Lily. With help. Didn't matter. Because those 3 words, they cracked something open inside me I didn't even know was still locked. A few feet away, I overheard Vernon mutter to Rick, "Maybe I misjudged the kid." Rick responded with a shrug. We all did. And I almost smiled. Not out of spite, but because, after all these years, they were the ones scrambling to make sense of me instead of the other way around. But the night wasn't done with me yet, because just as the sun dipped below the hills and the lights strung above the tables flickered on, my phone buzzed. It was a text from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Derek. My older cousin. The golden boy. We should talk. Alone. You need to know something before Monday. My heart stopped for half a beat. Monday was when the deal finalized. What could he possibly have to say now? I looked up and across the lawn. Derek was already staring at me. Expression unreadable. Eyes calculating. And that's when I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. Derek rarely texted me. When he did, it was either a forwarded meme 2 years too late or an accidental group message about fantasy football. Never a direct, pointed message like that. We should talk. Alone. You need to know something before Monday. Those 10 words buzzed in my palm like a wasp under glass. I looked across the lawn again. He hadn't moved, still standing by the dessert table, sipping a drink he probably didn't even taste. Our eyes locked, and he gave the faintest nod. So I nodded back. We met behind the wine barrels near the shed, a quiet corner that smelled of cedar and fermenting grapes. No one came back here unless they were sneaking a cigarette or a meltdown. Fitting. Derek leaned against a barrel like it was his private office, still dressed like a Banana Republic model, sleeves casually rolled, loafers too clean for any real walking. I didn't say anything. He started. You really went all in. Huh, he said. Tone neutral. What do you mean? Buying the block. Partnering with him. Coming back here like some kind of ghost with receipts? I waited. He sighed. Look, I don't care about the drama. Let the uncles squirm. That's entertainment. But I know who your buyer is. My stomach coiled. He wasn't supposed to know that. I kept my face still. And he looked at me. And for once, his mask cracked just enough to show something resembling concern. I looked into the deal. Last week, when I heard the name, I recognized it. And then I saw the zoning paperwork. That got my attention. I hadn't shared that with anyone. Not even Paul. He leaned in slightly. You're about to close on a block of property that, 10 years ago, our Uncle Vernon bought quietly and flipped through 3 shell companies. My mouth went dry. He made a fortune off under-the-table municipal contracts, paid off a city inspector to rezone without a paper trail. If your acquisition goes through, and someone digs into title transfers, it might all come back up. And I'd be holding the bag, I said quietly. He nodded. Your name's the clean one. Yours is the story they'll pin to it. The face in the press. The lawsuit bait. I stepped back. The vineyard spun a little. I did my due diligence, I said. Everything looked legit. Yeah, because Vernon's good at laundering time. And secrets. For a moment, we just stood there. The quiet was loud. Then he added, I don't think he knows you're tied to the buyer. Not directly. But if he finds out, he'll bury me before the ink dries. Derek exhaled sharply, running a hand through his perfect hair. I hated you. You know, he said. That came out of nowhere. I looked up. Startled. He chuckled. Dry and bitter. Not in the way you think. You had guts. You walked away. Failed in front of everyone and didn't hide. I envied that. I blinked. This was a man who once told me to grow a spine when I passed on a family job offer. And now? I asked. He shrugged. Now I think you're the only one in this family who built something real. But you're not bulletproof. I glanced down at the pen still in my pocket. No, I wasn't bulletproof. But I had something sharper. Intent. Why tell me all this? I asked. He met my gaze. Steady. Because I've been part of the machine long enough to know when someone's about to get crushed. And because maybe you're not the kid I thought you were. The words hit heavier than I expected. I gave him a slow nod. Thanks. Really? He looked down. Then back up. You still have time to reroute the deal. Change the holding name. Protect yourself. I paused. And Vernon. Let him roast. As I walked back toward the house, my brain was on fire. Paul. I had to talk to Paul, not because he could fix it, but because he'd been filming all weekend. Mick the garden. Captured every cutting remark. And maybe, just maybe, there was more he caught than he realized. I found him by the side gate, switching out SD cards in his camera atrium. You got a minute? He looked up. Always. We stepped into the garage, where the echo dampened the noise of the party. I explained everything. Vernon. The zoning. The risk. Paul listened without interrupting, hands still moving with muscle memory as he packed cables. When I finished, he gave a low whistle. Damn. Yeah. He paused. I have audio. From earlier. Vernon talking to Rick about pulling strings and burying screw-ups. Might not be a smoking gun, but it's warm. I stared. You're serious? He nodded. Want me to isolate it? I hesitated. Then said, not yet. Let's hold it. Because now, a plan was forming. One that wouldn't just protect me. It would expose him. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, the party winding down, string lights buzzing overhead. Lily curled up beside me, sleepy from sugar and dancing. Uncle Nate, she mumbled. Yeah, kiddo. She pointed to the pen sticking out of my shirt pocket. That's the pen you gave Grandpa. I blinked. How do you know that? I saw it once in his drawer. I used it to draw on a napkin when he wasn't looking. I smiled. Despite myself. She yawned. Why didn't he ever use it? I looked at the vineyard stretching into darkness. Maybe he didn't see what it meant. She nodded slowly. I think it's pretty. And with that, she fell asleep. I carried her inside, heart heavy and full at the same time. But one thought burned through the noise. If Vernon buried his deals this deep, he'd have no problem burying me. Unless I flipped the script before he had the chance. And thanks to Paul, I just might. Sunday morning hit like a hangover sun too bright. Birds too loud. And tension woven into every word at the breakfast table. Family reunions always leave a mess. But this one had aftershocks. People whispered in clumps near the buffet line. My name floated through the air, soft like pollen, everywhere and nowhere at once. But I had no time for gossip. I had a plan. Paul and I met early under the sycamore tree near the back fence, where the Wi-Fi signal was weak but the privacy was strong. He handed me a pair of earbuds and a small flash drive. This is everything from yesterday. Vernon. Rick. A few shady comments from Tara that made me rethink her mortgage business. I cracked a grin. But it faded quickly as I clicked play. The audio was crisp. Paul had mic'd the buffet table. Of all places. You could hear every clink of silverware and casual corruption served beside egg quiche. And then Vernon's voice. Low but clear. I buried that zoning change so deep the city forgot it existed. You think some startup kid is gonna sniff it out? Please. My heart rate spiked. Rick's laugh followed. He's just lucky. Probably doesn't even know what he bought. And then Vernon again. He doesn't need to know. As long as he signs, we're clean. If it blows up later, his name's on the front page. That was it. The confession. The arrogance. The intent. I looked at Paul. How fast can you clean this up? Strip the noise. Make it undeniable. He raised an eyebrow. An hour. Maybe less. Do it. While Paul worked, I made 2 calls. The first was to my attorney. Not the firm, my guy. Chris. The one who helped me through early fundraising when I had no equity and nothing but promise. I gave him the full story. Minus the family drama. He whistled. You've got blackmail. And a bomb. Which means I've got leverage. And a very narrow window. I just need 24 hours. He paused. You'll have it. But Nate, if you're wrong, I'm not. Click. Second call was to the buyer. The man who showed up in the Tesla, the one Vernon assumed was my boss. His name was Marcus Dean, CEO of a stealth real estate accelerator backed by 4 major VC firms. Publicly quiet. Privately ruthless. I'd met him through a friend of a friend. 6 months ago. Pitched him a vision. Transform an abandoned block into a tech-integrated community hub with housing, retail, and startup co-working space. He loved it. Quietly funded it. Trusted me to run point. I called his private number. Nate. He answered on the first ring. You ready to close tomorrow? Yes, I said. But with a twist, I explained the Vernon situation. The zoning fraud. The recordings. He didn't flinch. What do you want to do? Change the title to a separate holding entity. My name nowhere near it. Seal the deal quietly. Then, let the truth find its way out. Marcus paused. Then, I like it. Vultures shouldn't eat well forever. Noon rolled in. Guests started gathering for the farewell lunch under that same cursed tent. White linen. Lemonade. Polite exhaustion. But something had shifted. People watched me now like I was a weather system they didn't understand. Even Vernon. He gave me a nod casual, as if nothing had ever happened. I nodded back and smiled. Midway through lunch, Paul walked to the mic stand, tapping it gently. The chatter died down. Hi, everyone, he said. Before we wrap, Aunt Marie asked if I could show a short clip I made from yesterday. Kind of a time capsule. Don't worry, it's nothing formal, just family moments. Lies. But good ones. He clicked a remote. The screen lit up behind him. Projector humming. The first 30 seconds were harmless kids dancing. Wine glasses clinking. Someone's dad doing the Cupid shuffle. Then came the buffet table. And the voices. I buried that zoning change so deep, the room froze. Forks hung midair. Eyebrows climbed foreheads. He signs. We're clean. Vernon jolted to his feet. What the hell is this? Paul smiled politely. Audio overlay. Uncle. Pretty neat. Huh. You can't play that. Public family event. Consent was implied. Remember the release form Aunt Marie had us all sign last year? Vernon went pale. And just like that twist deployed, I stood. Slowly, letting silence do the heavy lifting. This wasn't about revenge, I said. It was about clarity. Because when people lie long enough, they forget what the truth sounds like. I walked off before anyone could clap. Because this wasn't a movie. This was a reckoning. Vernon stormed out. Rick followed. Phone glued to his ear. Probably calling a lawyer. The family sat stunned. A few cousins looked impressed. Most just looked unsettled. But Dad, he gave me a nod. Small. Tight. But real. Later. Back at the house, I packed my things. Slid the engraved pen back into my bag. This time, not as a symbol of pain but of distance traveled. As I zipped the bag, I saw something tucked beneath my jacket. Another envelope. No name. Same handwriting as the invite. Inside was a single piece of paper. Typed. You were always more than they saw. I'm sorry it took this long for someone to tell you that. M. Aunt Marie. Mom. Lily. No way to know. But the note landed deeper than any of Vernon's insults ever had. Because truth, even anonymous, is still truth. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. I know what you did. You think this is over? Think again. The sender. Vernon. And that's when I realized the real storm hadn't even started. The text sat on my screen like a threat carved in stone. I know what you did. You think this is over? Think again. No signature. But Vernon's name didn't need to be there. The venom dripped right through the font. He had lost control in front of the family. And men like him don't let things go, they retaliate. I stared at the message, fingers tight around the phone. My breath came shallow. Like I'd just outrun something I couldn't quite see. I had won the battle. But the war was just beginning. Monday morning came quiet but thick with tension. Even the sky looked undecided gray. Low-hanging. Like it was waiting to see how the day played out before choosing rain or sun. I stood in front of the mirror at my hotel, suit jacket on, shirt crisp, tie optional, but I went without it. This wasn't a courtroom. This was war by paperwork. The meeting was scheduled for 10 at a high-rise in downtown Sacramento. Marcus Dean would be there. The final documents would be signed. The entire redevelopment block, 10 acres of city potential, would officially shift under my holding entity. Or it would all go up in smoke. I arrived early. Security badge. Lobby elevator. Quiet hallway. Marcus was already there, sipping black coffee like it was a weapon. He nodded as I entered. Motioned to the seat across from him. You ready? He asked. I gave a short nod. As I'll ever be. Good. The title's clean. Zoning cleared. Holding LLC in place. You're invisible. Almost. He raised an eyebrow. Vernon knows. I added. He sent me a message. Marcus's face didn't change. But I could see something tighten behind the eyes. He has no leverage. You do. I want this to hold. Not just legally. Publicly. Marcus leaned forward. You want me to let it leak? I met his gaze. He plays backdoor deals and lies. I play transparency. Marcus smiled faintly. Cold but impressed. Ruthless. Quiet. Just the way I like it. He handed me the pen. Not a stylus. A real pen, silver. Heavy in the hand. And in that moment, I thought of the other pen. The one I gave my dad. The one that sat in a drawer for years. Unused. This pen, it wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. I signed. Initials. Date. Full name. Just like that. The block was mine. Quietly. Cleanly. Legally. The dream was real. But dreams come with shadows. 2 hours later. The news hit. A leaked tip to the Sacramento Gazette. Whistleblower exposes years-old zoning fraud in Midtown redevelopment. They didn't name me. Just sources close to the development. But Vernon. He was right there, named. Cited. Quoted in city records that Paul's cleaned-up audio had hinted toward. By noon, his phone must have been melting. And by 2 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. A long pause. Then Vernon's voice. Low and measured. You think this was smart? I didn't respond. You think humiliating me in front of them in public makes you clever? You just opened a door you can't close. Still, I said nothing. He continued. I gave this family its name, its legacy. You're a passing storm. Then I finally spoke. Storms cleanse. Click. That night, I sat on the rooftop of the hotel with Paul, 2 beers between us. No words for a while. He finally broke the silence. So, it's done. No, I said. It started. He nodded. Thoughtful. You good with that? I think I finally am. He smiled. For what it's worth. I always thought you were the one actually building something real. The city lights twinkled below us. People driving home, unaware that a chapter had just turned above their heads. But as we left the roof, my phone buzzed again. Not Vernon. This time, Derek. Check your email. He's not going down alone. My stomach flipped. I pulled up my inbox. Subject line. Exhibit A. Attachment. Scanned legal paperwork contracts I'd never signed. Invoices I'd never issued with my name on them. Doctored. Forged. Built to burn me if Vernon went under. And the email body. Thought you should know what he's preparing. I'm still on your side. But this goes deeper than you think. For a second, the world tilted. I'd just disarmed a bomb. But Vernon had planted another. And this one? This one had my name carved into the fuse. The forged documents stared back at me like ghosts in legal font contracts for consulting services I never rendered. Invoices I never saw. All neatly bundled and time-stamped. Vernon had prepared a paper trail. One that led straight to me. I paced the hotel room. The air too thick to breathe. Paul sat on the edge of the bed, reading the documents on his laptop. This is surgical, he said finally. Dates match your public appearances. The language even mimics your old business emails. Nate. If this leaks, I know. I cut in. It looks real. I clenched my fists, fighting the nausea crawling up my throat. This wasn't just an attack, it was a trap designed to erase everything I'd built. He wanted to flip the story. Paint me as the fraud. The fall guy. I turned to Paul. We need to get ahead of this. I'm not going down for his sins. First call. Chris. My lawyer. He answered groggily. You're calling after midnight. I assume it's bad. It's Vernon. He forged documents. Has them prepped in case the zoning scandal drags him down? I forwarded the email. Chris scanned it silently for a beat, then said, We can preempt. File a proactive disclosure with time-stamped evidence you were never associated with this. Bring in a digital forensics team. If we're lucky, we prove fabrication. And if we're not, he paused. Then it becomes about who controls the narrative. Second call. Derek. He picked up instantly. You saw the file. Yeah, I said. So why warn me? Because I was in the room when he had it made. I told him it was a bad idea. He didn't care. So why help me now? A beat. Because I think he's planning to throw me under too. My breath caught. He what? He added my name to the vendor lists. Claimed I funneled cash to your LLC. So he's burning both of us. Unless we burn him first. That night, Derek and I became something we'd never been before, allies. We met at a 24-hour diner off I-80. Empty booths. The smell of burnt coffee. And a waitress who didn't blink twice at two grown men with tired eyes and manila folders. Derek slid his across the table. Bank records. Vernon's shell companies. And a time-stamped video from 5 years ago, him bragging about owning the city board. I opened it and hit play. There he was. Younger. Louder. Drunk on champagne. Laughing to a group of investors. Zoning laws are for suckers. You get the right guy on the committee. You build what you want. Pay him in crypto if you want, he'll never report it. Proof. Authentic proof. Paul leaned across the booth and whispered, This is your grenade. I nodded. And I'm done hiding. We went public. Marcus coordinated with his PR team. Paul cut together a short docu-clip. Vernon's voice. The zoning fraud. The forged contracts. The bribery video. Clean. Precise. Legally airtight. Chris filed a disclosure with city attorneys and the press, framing me not as a whistleblower, but as a builder being blackmailed. It hit the news within 48 hours. Headline. Family scandal rocks. Midtown redevelopment city launches. Investigation into Uncle Blake. My name? Nowhere in the lead paragraph. By Friday, Vernon's attorney had issued a statement denying all allegations, but the footage had already gone viral. Twitter was ablaze. Reddit threads popped up dissecting every detail. The court of public opinion. Brutal. And the engraved silver pen showed up again. In Paul's video. 3 times. Once in my hand, once on the contract, once on my father's desk, in a still frame from the family gathering. It became the symbol of the story. Redemption. Exposure. Legacy. Then came the knock. My father, at my door. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe just finally real. "I saw the news," he said, not even waiting to be invited in. I stepped aside. He sat in the same chair Vernon once occupied in that same living room, decades ago. "You didn't just prove him wrong," he said quietly. "You proved me wrong." I said nothing. Let it sit. He looked around the room, hands folded in his lap. "I spent years thinking success had to look a certain way. You showed me it can look honest." A pause. "I'm proud of you, son." The words landed harder than Vernon's threats ever could. And just like that, the storm passed. Vernon's empire crumbled piece by piece, contracts pulled. City review boards reopened. Partners fleeing. He went quiet. No press appearances. No counterattacks. But I didn't gloat. Because some victories don't need applause. They just need space to breathe. Weeks later, Lily and I sat under the vineyard's oldest tree. The same one Grandpa planted the year he bought the land. She was drawing again, this time with markers and construction paper. Not the stolen pen. "What are you making?" I asked. "A sign," she said, holding it up proudly. In purple and blue. In shaky handwriting. It read, "Uncle Nate's Vineyard." I smiled. "You think it's mine now?" She looked up. "It's always been yours. They just didn't know it yet." And maybe that was the lesson. Sometimes we wait years for permission to claim what was always ours. So here I am, standing on 10 acres of dirt and dreams. The pen in my pocket. The past behind me. And ahead, well, ahead is the part I get to write, one page at a time. And if you're still here, thank you. For listening. For believing. For proving that truth, even buried deep, finds its way to light. Like, comment, and share if you believe family doesn't define you. What you do with the pain does. Because the ink may dry, but the story lives on. Story 2. My name is Jordan Walker. I'm 32. I work in IT. And I used to believe that if you just kept showing up for people, especially your own family, they'd eventually show up for you. That belief died this year. On my birthday. That morning. I wasn't expecting a parade. No candles. No Facebook flood of messages I'd long accepted. Our family wasn't like that. But I thought maybe a call? A text. Even. Just something that said, "We haven't forgotten you exist." Instead, I got a voicemail. My phone buzzed just as I poured my first cup of coffee. No name popped up, just a random number from a Milwaukee area code. I pressed play, hoping maybe it was Mom calling from a different line. Her voice came through the speaker, smooth and casual, like she was commenting on the weather. "Jordan, don't expect a call today. We're busy celebrating with real family. You should understand that by now." Click. That was it. No happy birthday. No goodbye. Just dismissal. My hand froze midair, mug hovering beneath my chin. The steam curled toward my face, then drifted off like the warmth had been sucked out of the room. My chest didn't hurt exactly, it just felt hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out the last bit of hope I'd been hoarding. And I stood there, still, while my coffee went cold. If you've ever had someone cut you out of their life with surgical precision, not with shouting but with silence. If you've ever felt like the spare tire in your own family, hit like, leave a dot in the comments. You're not alone. Because I used to believe that loyalty mattered, that being the dependable one, the fixer, the helper, the good kid who never asked for much meant something. Turns out, I was just the scaffolding they used to build their lives. And the second the structure held on its own, they tore me down without blinking. Let me take you back to where it all started going wrong. Not the voicemail that was just the final nail, The rot had been setting in for years. I'm the eldest. My parents split when I was 10, and my dad disappeared into the sunset with a second wife and no forwarding address. That left Mom, Patricia, and me, plus my little brother, Mason. From the jump, I was the responsible one. The one who packed Mason's lunches when Mom overslept. The one who skipped high school dances to help cover bills after she lost her job. I worked part-time at a gas station, then full-time delivering for a local grocery chain, just to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, Mason. He coasted. Dropped out of college to find himself in Arizona. Came back with a hangover and a girlfriend who couldn't spell employment. He had charm, sure. The kind that made people laugh at jokes that weren't funny and forgive things that shouldn't be forgiven. Mom adored him. She called him her sunshine. I was her rock. You know what rocks do? They get stood on. Over the years, I paid to fix her car twice. Co-signed a credit card when she said hers was maxed out from helping Mason with medical bills that later turned out to be concert tickets and a vape subscription. And then came the joint account. That one was on me. She said her Social Security payments were delayed. Needed a place to stash some funds. I figured, sure, why not? Family helps family, right? I added her. But the funny thing is, help never came the other way. Not once. Calls from her got shorter. Texts started getting ignored. Family dinners. I'd find out they happened only after seeing photos online. Last Thanksgiving, I baked a whole damn pecan pie, only to learn through a Facebook post they'd moved the location. When I called her, she said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy." Busy. I'd spent 3 hours braiding pecan halves into a perfect spiral. But I still showed up. I still sent birthday cards. I still fixed her Wi-Fi when she forgot her password for the 10th time. I still cared. Because deep down, I thought maybe I could earn her love the way I earned my paycheck. By working harder. But then came the voicemail. On the day I was born, and everything inside me stopped. No tears. No rage. Just that chilling clarity you get when you finally realize this isn't salvageable. I walked to the couch and sat, my hands still trembling from the coffee cup. The voicemail looped in my head like a bad pop song. We're celebrating with real family. I guess I wasn't real enough. Then I remembered something. A year ago, Mom asked me to add her to that joint account again, said she needed it to apply for a rental. I never got around to removing her afterward. It had been on my to-do list, somewhere under buy paper towels and rotate tires. So I grabbed my laptop, logged in. What I saw made my breath hit. $14,000. Gone. Mostly from a tax refund I deposited last month. I'd planned to move it later, didn't get around to it. But someone else did. Mason's name was on multiple transactions. Electronics store. Flight reservation. A brunch place downtown I'd never stepped foot in. There was even a vacation rental deposit. In Maui. I stared at the screen. No blinking. No breathing. Just numbers cold. Sterile numbers spelling out a betrayal I hadn't dared imagine. And still, I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't call them. Instead, I moved. Slowly. Deliberately. I transferred every remaining cent into my private account. Then, with one click, I closed the joint account. Permanently. No warning. No message. Just like the voicemail. But that wasn't the only thing they'd taken. A memory sparked something about the car. A year ago, when Mom's old Toyota finally gave out, I'd given her the Honda. It was technically mine left to me by my uncle, but I hadn't changed the title yet. DMV trips are soul-killing. So I'd procrastinated. She promised she'd get it transferred. Said it was just paperwork. Funny thing about paperwork? It matters. I opened the drawer. Pulled out the title. Still in my name. I picked up the phone and called an old friend who flips cars on Craigslist. Can you pick up a '98 Accord tonight? Clean title. Cash. He arrived an hour later. I signed. Took the cash. and left the keys in the mailbox. Mom didn't even know it was gone until the next morning. And no, I didn't answer her texts. Because there was still one more thing they'd taken that I hadn't realized. The house. Not legally. On paper. It was mine. My grandparents left it to me when they passed. But I let Mom stay no rent. Just a promise to keep it clean and cover the property taxes. Instead, she let Mason move in. Built a studio in the basement. Called it our family home like it had always been hers. Last month, Mason said something that etched into my memory like acid. We're thinking of redoing the kitchen. Don't worry, we'll let you know when it's done. Let me know. In my house, I opened the drawer again. Pulled out the lease agreement I drafted years ago but never sent. Then I made one more phone call. To a lawyer friend. And what we drafted next. Let's just say it came with legal weight and a little red ribbon. A package I would personally hand deliver. The next morning. But first, I had to walk through that house one more time. To see what else they'd erased. And what I found on the basement wall, that's when everything truly snapped. The next morning, I parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way. Not because I was hiding. I just didn't want them to hear me coming. Milwaukee was still half asleep. The air had that late spring chill, the kind that tricked your skin into thinking winter wasn't done with you. I tucked the envelope deeper into my jacket pocket and shoved my hands in with it. The legal documents pressed against my palm like they were humming with electricity. That house, the one I grew up in, looked almost the same from the outside. The same chipped siding. The same sagging porch. Except now, there was a string of patio lights tacked up with thumbtacks Mason had definitely borrowed from my drawer. They flickered weakly even though it was morning. I stepped up onto the porch. Before I could knock, I caught movement through the living room window. Mason shirtless. In pajama pants chugging orange juice straight from the jug. Music playing from his phone. Some auto-tuned rap track I didn't recognize. Classic. I slipped the envelope through the mail slot. Let it fall with a soft thunk onto the hardwood floor. Then I let myself in. I still had a key. No one ever asked for it back. The scent hit me first. Patchouli candles mixed with old laundry. Someone had been microwaving frozen burritos. The hallway was cluttered with mismatched shoes, Amazon boxes, and a skateboard that hadn't been used in years. Nothing about it felt like a home anymore. I headed straight for the basement. It used to be mine. When I was 14, I painted the walls navy blue and hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. I'd sneak down there with comic books and a flashlight when Mom and her boyfriend of the month were screaming upstairs. It was the only place I ever felt safe. Now, Mason had converted it into his recording studio. The glow stars were gone. The walls were painted over in a sterile eggshell white, except for one. One wall was covered in black foam panels, the cheap kind you find in starter podcast kits. Cables snaked across the floor, tangled like weeds. A broken MIDI keyboard sat on a milk crate next to a mic stand duct-taped at the joints. And then I saw it. Near the bottom of the back wall, just behind a pile of old blankets, was a faint shadow beneath the paint. I walked closer. It was still there. The height chart. Little pencil lines with years next to them. J. 50, 2006. J. 58, 2009. The last one. J. 61, 2011. The paint hadn't completely covered it. It was bleeding through like a ghost, refusing to be erased. My throat tightened. He painted over it. Not even with primer. Just a lazy, single coat. Like it wasn't worth the effort to truly hide. I reached out and ran my fingers along the wall, tracing the last mark. That's when I heard footsteps upstairs. I froze. Then, a voice Mom's muffled but clear enough. You should have seen her face when I told her Mason's taking over the house. I told her, Jordan's got his own place. He doesn't need to hang around here anymore. A pause. A laugh. I mean, he never really fit. Did he? I didn't move. My chest filled with something slow and heavy, like wet cement. There was a time, not long ago, when words like that would have broken me. when I would have stood there, crushed and paralyzed, wondering what I did wrong, begging myself not to cry. Not today. Today, I turned and walked upstairs quietly, calmly. They were in the kitchen. Mom had curlers in her hair, sipping coffee, talking on speakerphone. She didn't see me at first. Mason did. He looked up from the counter, a spoonful of cereal halfway to his mouth. What the hell? Mom turned. Her eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. I held up my phone, played a voicemail. The voicemail. Don't expect a call today. We're busy celebrating with real family. I paused it. They went silent. Mom shifted. Jordan. That was taken out of context. I smiled. A small, tired smile. No. Mom. That was the context. Mason huffed. What? Are you trying to guilt trip us now? We didn't owe you anything. You're right, I said. You didn't. But neither did I. I dropped a second envelope on the kitchen table. This is for you, I said to Mason. And for your studio. He blinked. What the hell is this? Notice of eviction. I said. 30 days. As of today, you are officially trespassing. Mom gasped. I turned to her, pulled out a folded photocopy of the house deed, slid it across the counter. They left it to me. Not you. Not both of us. Me. You knew that. She was silent. I let you stay because I thought we were family. Because I believed we'd rebuild. But it's clear now you rebuilt without me. You just forgot to tell me I wasn't part of the blueprint. Mason jumped up, voice rising. You're bluffing. You can't kick us out. This is Mom's house. I met his eyes. No, it's mine. You can check the title. He lunged toward me, fist clenched. But Mom grabbed his arm. Don't, she hissed. He stared at her, at me, then stormed out, knocking over a chair on his way. Mom stood very still. Then, in a voice so quiet it almost cracked, she said, I needed that money. Jordan, I did it for Mason. You never needed me like he did. That broke something I didn't even know was left inside me. I stepped closer, looked her in the eyes. That's the thing. Mom, I did need you. Just not like that. I turned to leave. She called after me. Where are you going? To reclaim the part of me you painted over. As I opened the front door, I looked back one last time. By the way, I took the car, too. You'll see the check in the mail. I closed the door behind me, walked into the cold sunlight, breathing, free. But the war wasn't over yet. There was still one more piece of this game to play. And a neighbor I hadn't seen in years was about to give me the final push I needed. I didn't expect to see her. Honestly, I hadn't thought about Mrs. Margaret in years. She used to babysit me when Mom worked night shifts. The kind of neighbor who always wore a cardigan, even in July, and baked banana bread just because the bananas were browning. I spotted her on my way out, standing by the hydrangeas lining her porch, snipping dead petals with a tiny pair of shears. Same hunched back, same halo of white curls. But her eyes still sharp as ever. They locked onto mine like she'd been waiting. Jordan Walker, she said, not missing a beat. Well, you're a sight. I walked up the cracked sidewalk, suddenly 10 years old again. Hi, Mrs. Margaret. Didn't think you'd still be here. She chuckled, clipping another petal. I'm like mildew, sweetheart. Hard to scrub out. We both laughed. The sound brittle and familiar. You're taller than I remember, she said. I haven't grown since high school. I replied, no, but you stand taller, like a man who's finally stopped apologizing for breathing. I blinked. That hit harder than it should have. We stood in silence for a moment. Then she tilted her head toward the house I'd just exited. Things got bad over there. Huh? I didn't answer, just nodded. She didn't pry, just said, Come inside. I made tea. Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil. A little too warm. A little too cramped. But full of life. She poured 2 mugs. No questions. No small talk. Just presence. Finally, as we sat at her tiny table with the lace placemats, she said, "I remember the day your grandfather brought home the deed. He was so proud, kept pointing to your name. Said, 'That boy'll have something solid to stand on, even if everything else goes to hell.'" I swallowed hard. He'd be disappointed. "No. Honey," she said gently, "he'd be furious. Not at you, at how they treated what he left behind." I looked down at my tea, watching the steam curl. Then she leaned in, voice lower. "Your mom tells people the house is Mason's now." I looked up. "She what? Told me that last Christmas?" she said. "Said she and Mason were planning to modernize it, said you'd moved out long ago. Had no interest in family property." My hands tightened around the mug. There it was. The missing piece. They weren't just stealing from me. They were rewriting the story, erasing me like I never existed. "Did she say why?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Said you were always distant, hard to read. That Mason was her real heart." Nah. My throat burned. "Mrs." Margaret reached across the table, her fingers warm and papery. "Some people don't recognize the ones holding the ladder. They only see the ones dancing at the top." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. But inside, a switch flipped. They'd spent years using me, draining me. But now, they were rewriting me out of my own life story. And I wasn't going to let them. Not quietly. That night, I started digging. Every receipt, every email, every phone notification that smelled wrong, I pieced together a trail, a clear pattern of intentional misuse. Mason had been using my bank account like a slush fund. Not just for junk food and concert tickets, he'd bought studio equipment, hired a social media manager, even booked a hotel in for networking. With my money. But it got worse. One email caught my eye. Subject line: "Offer for your home." It was from a real estate investor. Someone named Keith Weller. He'd reached out asking if Mason was still interested in selling. Wait. Selling. I scanned the thread. "Hi Mason. Just following up on your inquiry. If you're still open to selling the house on 9th Street, we'd love to make an offer." No reply from Mason. But the implication was clear. He'd pitched the house as his. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. They were going to sell it. My house. The only real thing I'd ever been left with. And they thought I'd just disappear. I didn't sleep that night. I started writing. A timeline of every expense. Copies of the deeds. Email printouts. Bank statements. Then I called my friend Olivia, real estate lawyer. Shark in heels. I told her everything. She was quiet for a beat. "Jordan, do you want to sue?" I paused. "No," I said. "I want to end it. Cleanly. Legally. I want to take back what's mine without the mess." She nodded through the phone. "Okay." Then we draft 3 things. 1. A formal notice of ownership transfer enforcement, basically a reminder that the house is 100% mine, and they're in violation by claiming otherwise. 2. A cease and desist for Mason using the property to negotiate. 3. A final demand letter, 30 days to vacate. After that, we'd file for court-ordered removal, all with full legal standing. No loopholes. No arguments. By morning, the papers were ready. I held them in my hand, still warm from the printer, and felt something strange settle in my chest. Power. Not the loud, vengeful kind. The quiet kind. The kind that comes when you stop asking for a seat at the table and start building your own. Before I dropped the letters off, I stopped by the house one last time. No one was home. Perfect. I let myself in. Walked the halls like a ghost. In the living room, on the coffee table, was a photo album. Brown leather, Gold corners. I opened it. Page after page of family photos. Mason as a toddler. Mom holding him. Mason in graduation robes. Mason with friends. No me. Not one. Not even from when we were kids. I wasn't just cut out of the present. I'd been erased from the past. That was when I realized this wasn't revenge. This was a rescue. I was saving myself from a narrative that had never made space for me. I left the letters on the kitchen table, took one last look at the hallway wall where my childhood had been buried in eggshell paint, and then I walked out. Not broken. Not angry. Just done. But little did I know they weren't. Because what happened 3 days later was worse than anything I expected. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. I don't know what I expected. Maybe an explosion. Maybe a desperate voicemail. Maybe Mason threatening to torch the house. But what I got was nothing. Dead air. And that scared me more than any tantrum ever could. I checked the camera I'd discreetly installed on the front porch, motion triggered. Synced to my phone. Every morning, I'd skim the clips, waiting for chaos. But all I saw was stillness. No screaming. No furniture being dragged out. Just shadows moving behind curtained windows. Then, on the third night, it happened. 2:47 a.m. Bang. 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 I jolted awake. Heart hammering. Someone was at my apartment door. I live in a quiet building, mostly retired couples and college grad loners. No one bangs at this hour unless something's wrong. I grabbed my phone, turned on the hallway light, and looked through the peephole. Mason. Eyes bloodshot. Cheeks flushed. Hoodie stained with what looked like pizza sauce or rage, I couldn't tell. I opened the door just wide enough to speak. It's late. He pushed at the door, but I blocked it with my foot. Are you serious? Jordan. He spat. You're actually going through with this? I didn't answer. Eviction. Really? Over what, some money and a couple of Facebook posts? I blinked. That's when I realized he genuinely believed this was petty. He saw it all: the theft, the gaslighting, the erasure as nothing. Just another hiccup in his charming, consequence-free life. You broke into my account, I said evenly. You lied about ownership. You tried to sell my house. He threw his hands up. I was gonna cut you in. Eventually, we just needed some fast cash. Man. I stared at him. You think I care about the cash? Silence. Then he smirked. You're lonely. Bro, that's your real problem. Always have been. You think this'll make you feel better. Owning a house nobody visits. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the years of playing the bigger person. Maybe it was hearing my pain weaponized like a punchline. But I said, I'd rather sit alone in truth than be surrounded by people who love me out of convenience. That hit. He froze for half a beat, then shoved something into my chest. A photo. I looked down. It was a printed picture, grainy, folded twice, of Mom, Mason, and my father. I hadn't seen him in over 20 years. They were at a diner, laughing, arm around each other. They reached out to him. Mason said flatly, Thought you should know. Figured maybe he would step up since you're cutting the rest of us off. I looked up, stunned. Dad came back. Only after Mom told him about the house. Mason sneered. He wants in. He says it should have gone to both his sons. The word both echoed in my skull like gunfire. Tell him to show me the will, I said quietly. Mason just smiled. You'll be hearing from his lawyer. And with that, he turned and walked away, whistling like he hadn't just set my childhood on fire all over again. The next morning, I met with Olivia again. I slid the photo across her desk. She squinted at it, lips thinning. I didn't know your dad was still alive. He wasn't, I said bitterly. Not to me. She nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. What's his name? Richard Walker. She typed into her laptop, fingers flying. He has no legal standing, she said. The house came from your mom's side, not his. And unless your grandparents changed the will, which I doubt they left it to you specifically. I sighed in relief. So it's just noise. For now, she said. But prepare yourself. They're going to make this ugly. When entitled people realize their grip is slipping, they dig claws. She leaned in. But remember this, Jordan, your boundaries are not cruelty. They're survival. The next 48 hours were a blur. Emails from fake accounts calling me a heartless snake. Old family friends messaging me things like, I thought you were better than this. Even my old high school English teacher reached out. I always admired your loyalty. Jordan, what happened? I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I poured my energy into packing. Not for them, for me. I'd found a quiet Airbnb upstate. Wooded. Remote. No cell signal unless you climbed a hill. It wasn't running away. It was recovery. But before I left, I went back to the house once more. It was time to deliver the final warning. I walked in through the back. They'd left the door unlocked. Classic. Mom was in the kitchen, sorting through mail. Mason wasn't home. She looked up, startled. Jordan, don't. Just listen. I placed a manila folder on the counter. Inside, copies of the deed, bank statements, and a printed declaration from Olivia's office confirming the house's legal chain of custody. You have 17 days left, I said. After that, the sheriff gets involved. Her lips trembled. You're really doing this? You already did it, I replied. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. You said I never needed you, I said. Voice steady. But I did. I just stopped asking once I realized you were never going to show up. She didn't argue. Didn't cry. Just stood there. Small and quiet. I turned to leave, but right before I hit the door, she said, I hope you're happy. I paused. No, I said. But at least I'm honest. I walked out, heart racing, hands shaking, but something in me felt lighter. Like I'd just pulled a knife out of my own back and finally let the wound bleed. That night, as I drove toward the tree line and away from the city, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. But I wasn't naive. I knew they wouldn't go quietly. And sure enough, 2 days later, the cops showed up. The knock came at 6:42 a.m. I was staying in a tiny cedar cabin 2 hours north of Milwaukee, nestled between birch trees and silence. No cell service. No neighbors within a quarter mile. Just wind, pine needles, and the faint sound of my own breath. So when someone pounded on the door before sunrise, my body snapped to alert like a spring-loaded trap. I opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, heart hammering. 2 sheriff's deputies stood on the porch. Jordan Walker. One asked. Yes. You're being served. He handed me a sealed envelope, then nodded and turned away. No drama. No threats. Just a cold, official slap across the face. I closed the door and stared at the package in my hands. Not a lawsuit. Not an eviction reversal. Something worse. A restraining order. Filed by my mother. Claiming harassment. Emotional intimidation. Threats of displacement. She wrote that I'd bullied her and her youngest son into vacating their long-standing residence and was weaponizing legal tactics to destabilize a vulnerable household. I felt like the air had been vacuumed from the room. My hands trembled. I sat down at the edge of the bed. The envelope still clutched between my fingers. And I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so predictable it bordered on cliché. When people like my mom run out of control, they don't admit guilt. They flip the narrative. Suddenly, I wasn't the betrayed son, I was the villain. And in America, perception is currency. But here's the twist she didn't see coming. I had receipts. Every bank transfer. Every text message. Every voicemail, including that one. and Olivia had already anticipated this move. By noon, she'd filed a counter-petition, complete with an itemized response to each false claim and an affidavit from Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor who'd overheard Mom's earlier bragging about taking over the house. "I'm not worried," Olivia said over a shaky signal, "but this is going to escalate. Are you ready for a fight?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, because this wasn't just about reclaiming property anymore. This was about reclaiming reality. I returned to the city the next day. No fanfare. No announcement. I parked on a side street and watched the house from my car. It looked different now, like a stage set. A place I used to know. The porch light flickered. The curtains were drawn, but someone had scrawled something in chalk on the sidewalk out front. Big, uneven letters. "Traitor." I blinked. It wasn't even subtle. Mason's style. Through and through. But I didn't flinch. Didn't erase it. Let the neighborhood see the wound. That weekend, I filed a formal police report documenting financial theft, digital fraud, and misuse of my identity. It wasn't about sending them to jail. It was about protecting the truth. Because if they were willing to lie to the courts, to twist public perception, then I needed the law on record before they spun it further. I also did one last thing, something Olivia had gently suggested weeks ago. I sat down and wrote a letter to the executor of my grandparents' will. Mr. Lewis Dunn, old school attorney, retired now, but still sharp. He'd handled their estate personally. In my letter, I asked one question. Did anyone ever attempt to challenge or alter the inheritance after their passing? I mailed it with a return envelope and forgot about it. Or tried to. Then, 5 days later, I got the answer. A handwritten note from Mr. Dunn. Shaky but clear. In 2015, your mother asked to refile the will. She wanted to include Mason as a joint heir. I declined. She dropped it. There is no legal document giving him any share of that house. You remain the sole beneficiary. My hands trembled. Not because I didn't know that already, but because now I had proof. She'd tried to rewrite the ending, quietly, and failed. Armed with that letter, I returned to court. Olivia stood beside me in a charcoal blazer and calm fury. Mason didn't show. Mom came with a lawyer who looked confused and annoyed. Probably realized halfway in that this wasn't going to end well. The judge reviewed everything. Our documents. Their claims. The voicemail. The bank records. Even Mrs. Margaret's signed statement. It was clinical. Almost boring. Until the end. The judge looked at my mother. "Ma'am, it is clear this filing was made in bad faith. There is no evidence of harassment and significant evidence of financial misconduct on your part. This order is dismissed. Effective immediately." He turned to me. "Mr. Walker, if you wish to pursue civil damages, you have a case. But that's your choice." I nodded. Didn't say a word. Not yet. We left the courthouse in silence. Mom didn't look at me. I didn't wait for her to, because I still had one card left to play. That night, I returned to the house one final time, not to argue, not to plead, to finish it. Mason was out. Mom was upstairs, packing. The deadline was 4 days away, but I could feel the air changing like a storm finally breaking. I walked into the living room. The chalk writing had washed away in the rain. Everything looked emptier. The couch was gone. The photos had been taken down, except one, a single frame left on the wall, a picture of Mason, front and center, and me, cropped out. I stared at it, and I understood. They'd never just used me. They'd erased me, one memory at a time. So I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a key, and slid it onto the table. It was symbolic, yes, but also real. The last copy of the house key I had ever given her. I left it there, not out of peace, out of closure. Because I wasn't the villain in their story. I just finally stopped playing the fool in mine. But as I walked out the front door, a figure stepped onto the porch. My father. He looked exactly like I remembered. That was the worst part. Same weathered face. Same tired jawline. Same piercing gray eyes that always made it seem like he was looking through you. Not at you. Except now, his hair was more salt than pepper, and his shoulders slumped like the years had finally caught up. "Jordan," he said, like he had a right to. I didn't respond. Just stood there. One hand still on the doorknob, the other clenched in my jacket pocket. "You got a minute?" he asked. I should have said no, but something inside me, curiosity, maybe, closure, nodded. We sat outside on the steps, him on the top, me on the bottom like we were decades apart. Maybe we were. "I saw the papers," he said. "Didn't think it'd come to this." "It wouldn't have," I replied. "If people had just stayed honest." He winced like I'd slapped him. "I made mistakes. You made absences." I corrected. Silence. He nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that. Like he wanted me to hit him with something softer so he could feel like we were finally even. "Your mother reached out a few months ago," he said. "Said Mason was struggling. That you were being aggressive." I laughed once. Sharp. "Of course she did. I didn't come to take sides." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. "Because I thought maybe we could talk. Clear the air." That sentence, that phrase made something rupture in me. "Clear the air," I snapped. "You vanished when I was 12. Didn't write. Didn't call. And now that there's property involved, suddenly you want to reconnect." He didn't deny it. Didn't flinch. Just stared ahead at the dying hydrangeas by the porch. "I wasn't ready to be a father," he said finally. "Then why try now?" "Because I'm dying." Silence. A long, bone-deep kind. "Pancreatic," he added, like punctuation. "Maybe 6 months? A year if I'm lucky?" For a moment, I felt nothing. No sadness. No anger. Just static. "So what? This is your redemption tour?" I asked. "Make peace with your son before it's too late." "I don't expect peace," he said softly. "I just didn't want to die pretending I hadn't done damage." That stopped me. Because for the first time, it didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like confession. But still I wasn't ready to hand him absolution like it was spare change. "Then here's the truth," I said. "You left me with people who drained me, used me, then painted me as a villain the moment I stopped bleeding for them." He looked down. "I'm sorry." And I believed him. But it didn't fix anything. We sat in silence again. The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed. Life kept happening. Finally, he stood up. "I won't bother you again," he said. "I'll be at the VA center in Racine. That's all." And then he walked off down the sidewalk. No drama. No begging. Just gone. Again. The final eviction went through 2 days later. A deputy oversaw the process. Civil. Efficient. No yelling. Mason had already moved most of his things. Mom wasn't home when they arrived. Just a note on the fridge. "You chose this. I hope it keeps you warm." I took the note down, crumpled it, and dropped it in the trash. Then I walked through the house alone, room by room, each corner echoing with a different ghost. The living room where I once built blanket forts. The hallway where Grandpa marked my height with a Sharpie. Year after year, that wall had been painted over. Of course, erased. I ran my fingers across it anyway. Felt the indentation beneath the fresh coat. Felt me, still buried under their efforts to forget. I found the old voicemail again on my phone, the one they left on my birthday that started it all. Just background chatter. Mason talking over a game. My mother barely remembering what day it was. No warmth. No love. Just obligation. I deleted it. Finally. And then I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was broken, but because I wasn't anymore. Weeks passed. I started remodeling the house, not just painting or fixing, but reclaiming. Each room I redesigned wasn't for them. It was for me. The studio Mason used, now a quiet reading room. With no soundproof foam or TikTok ring lights, the kitchen, once chaotic with other people's messes, was now a place of calm air fryer, espresso machine, small succulents on the sill. It became mine. Slowly, on a Wednesday afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. From the VA center. A nurse wrote it. Said my father had passed. No funeral request. No last wish. Just a note he'd listed me as his emergency contact. At the bottom of the page, she'd scribbled in cursive. He spoke of you often. Said you were the only thing he got half right. I stared at that line until the ink blurred. I didn't cry, but I felt acknowledged. In a life where I'd been erased from photos, from walls, from memory, someone had remembered me. And that was enough. Or so I thought. Until the day I opened the mailbox and found a notice I never expected. Petition for partial reinstatement of ownership. Filed by Mason Walker. The envelope was thick. Too thick for a simple notice. Inside, legal papers. Court letterhead. Mason's name typed in bold at the top. Petition for partial reinstatement of ownership. I stood on my front porch, fingers numb, reading the words over and over as if repetition would make them disappear. He was claiming that since he had resided at the property in good faith, contributed labor and aesthetic upgrades, and was a biological child of the prior occupant, he had a right to a portion of the house's value. In other words, squat, remodel a closet, post a few selfies, now you own equity. I should have been furious. But what I felt was exhausted. Like standing at mile 25 of a marathon you didn't train for. I called Olivia. She answered on the second ring. Calm and direct. We expected this, she said. He's reaching. It won't stick. But I hesitated. Will it drag me back into court? A pause. Yes. Probably a few hearings. But we'll bury it. He doesn't have a claim. She was right. Still, the emotional toll. Different story. The hearing was set 2 weeks later. Mason showed up in a wrinkled blazer over a hoodie, chewing gum like he was on break at a vape shop. He didn't look at me. Didn't need to. Because I knew his whole angle. He wasn't trying to win the house. He was trying to wear me down. Outlast me. Embarrass me into a settlement. His lawyer threw out buzzwords like constructive trust and equitable ownership. But they had no paperwork. No receipts. Just noise. Olivia stood up. Precise and surgical. She outlined the title chain. Presented the letter from the estate lawyer. Played the voicemail. Quoted the restraining order dismissal. Cited the police report for unauthorized access. Then she did something I didn't expect. She projected one of Mason's old TikToks on the courtroom screen. It showed him dancing in the living room, my living room, while the caption read, "My house, my rules." There was a pause. Even the bailiff chuckled. The judge shook his head. Petition denied. And frankly, Mr. Walker, I'd recommend you stop wasting this court's time. Bang of the gavel. Done. Over. Mason stormed out without looking back. And just like that, the air shifted again. Not lighter, but cleaner. The weeks that followed felt strange, not peaceful, just quiet. Grief had no target anymore, no battles to gear up for. And sometimes, that's harder, because now I had to sit with the real cost. A mother who erased me, a brother who sabotaged me, a father who waited too long. And yet I was still standing. I kept working on the house, planted basil in the kitchen window, got a dog small mutt named Pixel who followed me around like I was the entire universe. I reconnected with an old friend from college. We got lunch, then coffee, then dinner. Life was unfolding. Slowly, but not on anyone's terms but mine. One afternoon, I got a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Margaret. She held a plate of lemon bars and a padded envelope. These came for you at my place by mistake, she said. Postman's new. Got confused. I thanked her. Took the envelope. And we chatted briefly. As she turned to go, she paused. You know, your grandma would have been proud, she said. Of what? Of the way you kept your spine and your kindness. Those two rarely stick together these days. I swallowed hard. Thank you. She left, and I opened the envelope. Inside, a letter from Mr. Dunn's office. Apparently, my grandfather had written something else, a handwritten addendum to the will that was never formally filed, but had been archived with the estate records. It wasn't legal. Just emotional, a paragraph, scrawled in blue ink, in that careful print he used when teaching me cursive. To Jordan, if you're reading this, it means you've had to fight harder than I hoped. I'm sorry for what the others didn't give you. This house is yours, not because of blood. It's yours because you were the only one who ever asked how you could help. And then showed up. I sat with that for a long time, longer than I probably should have. Then I pinned it to the inside of a kitchen cabinet. Not on display, but somewhere close, somewhere true. So what's the lesson here? Don't let legacy define you. Don't mistake shared DNA for shared values. Maybe, but here's what I know for sure. Sometimes, healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come with hugs or apologies or sweeping cinematic moments. Sometimes, healing looks like standing still in a house that tried to forget you and refusing to disappear. It looks like planting herbs in the sunlight, like saying no without explaining, like letting go of a voicemail. And sometimes, just sometimes, healing looks like finally, quietly, living well. So yeah, that's the story. And I'm still here, still whole, still standing in the house I built twice, once with drywall, and once with truth. Thank you for listening. If any of this hit you hard, I get it. Drop a comment. Share your story. And hey, if you're holding on to a truth no one else believes, hold tighter. Because sometimes, being the villain in their story is how you finally become the hero in your own